Okay, so you want to dive into this question of whether humans are uh, hardwired for violence, huh?
Yeah.
We found this article, and let me tell you, it's a wild ride through the evolution of human aggression.
You know what I found really interesting? The article points out this huge decline in violence throughout human history.
Yeah, like how much less violent things are now.
Exactly. Like, did you realize that these days less than 1% of all human deaths are actually from violence? It's a huge difference from what our ancestors faced.
Yeah, no kidding. It's crazy to think about how we went from violence being like an everyday thing to, well, not so much. And the article mentions all these prehistoric skeletons covered in battle scars.
Right.
It makes you think about what it was like back then. It's kind of intense.
Yeah, it's easy to focus on the brutality, but you got to remember what life was like back then. It was all about survival. Resources were limited and danger was everywhere.
So you're saying violence, even though it's brutal, served a purpose.
Exactly. It was about securing resources for the group to survive.
So it was less about bloodlust and more about practicality.
Exactly. And it's interesting, the article draws a parallel with the animal kingdom. You see it with lions, with chimps. They engage in violence too, especially within their own species,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
to establish dominance and, make sure they survive. It's a strategy that's deeply rooted in us through evolution.
That is really interesting. So if we see this mirrored in animals, does that mean we're like genetically programmed for violence? The article mentions this MAO gene and how it's linked to aggression.
Right, and that's where it gets really complicated. See, the MAO gene helps regulate these neurotransmitters in our brains that affect mood and behavior.
Okay.
But, and this is important, genes aren't destiny. Our environment plays a huge role too, how we're raised, our experiences, the societies we live in, all of these things interact with our genes.
So you mean it's not just nature versus nurture?
Exactly. It's this intricate dance between both. It's how they work together. The article makes it clear that it's this interplay, this a complex symphony of nature and nurture that determines our capacity for aggression.
Okay, this next part kind of blew my mind. The article talks about this self-domestication theory. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, it's a pretty wild idea.
Yeah.
It suggests that as humans evolve, we might actually be becoming less aggressive.
Hold on. Self-domestication. Sounds like we're turning into house pets or something.
Well, not exactly, but I get what you mean. Think about how we've domesticated animals over time. We've bred them to be less aggressive, to be better companions to humans.
Oh, I see. So you're comparing that to humans. Like, as we build these big, complex societies that rely on everyone working together, we're accidentally becoming tamer.
Exactly. The theory is that people who were less aggressive were more likely to do well in these new societies. They could build stronger relationships, work together better, and pass on those traits to their kids.
Wow, so building civilization could actually be changing us on a biological level.
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy when you think about it.
It is, and it gets even more interesting when you think about the long-term trend toward peace that the article talks about. Even though humans can be really violent, there's been a clear shift towards more peaceful ways of living together over time.
Which is definitely a good thing, considering our history. But the article doesn't sugarcoat things either. It brings up stuff like Genghis Khan and those huge conquests.
Yeah,
It reminds us that we're still capable of a lot of violence.
exactly. It's important to remember that even with this move towards peace, the potential for violence hasn't just disappeared. The article makes the point that throughout history, times of intense violence often happen alongside things like instability conflicts over resources, or when social structures fall apart.
So those primal instincts are still there, lurking beneath the surface, just waiting for the right moment to come out.
That's a good way to put it. The article seems to say that while we've created social structures and rules to control aggression, those deeper instincts, those things we developed over millions of years of evolution, they haven't completely gone away. They're a part of us, whether we want them to be or not.
That's a lot to take in. It makes you wonder if we've spent centuries, maybe even thousands of years, developing these ways to be peaceful, but that capacity for aggression is still there. What does that mean for the future? How can we balance those two sides of ourselves?
Those are the big questions, aren't they? And I think it's great that this article doesn't try to give us all the answers. It's more about giving us a new way to look at these complex issues as we try to figure them out.
It makes you think about what kind of world we're building, for ourselves and for our kids and grandkids. If we still have that capacity for violence, even when we're trying to be peaceful, what can we actually do with that knowledge?
That's the big question, right? And I like how this article doesn't pretend to have all the answers. It's more about giving us a new way to think about these complicated issues, as we try to navigate the world.
Yeah, totally. Like a good mental workout.
Yeah.
But the article does give us some hints about moving forward, right? It talks about how we've made laws, social rules, institutions, all these systems that are designed to kind of counteract Are more destructive urges.
Definitely. We've created these amazing systems to channel our instincts, to take that primal energy and point it in a more positive direction. Like, look at competitive sports. That can be a powerful outlet for aggression, a way to experience competition, even dominance. But it's all within a controlled setting with rules and boundaries.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's like we've taken those raw urges and made them more acceptable, transformed them into something that can be beneficial. And I bet you've seen firsthand how those outlets can be really healthy ways to deal with those deep-seated instincts.
Absolutely. And it shows just how remarkable humans are. We're not just slaves to our biology. We can learn, we can adapt, we can consciously change our behavior and build better societies. We have the power to create a world that promotes peace, even knowing that we're capable of terrible violence.
So we're not just doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past,
Hmm.
like stuck in this cycle of violence forever.
Not at all. The fact that we're even having this conversation, that we're trying to understand these things with empathy and intelligence that shows our potential for growth and progress. And remember, the article emphasizes that the decline of violence isn't some automatic thing. It requires effort, understanding, and a willingness to create systems that actually support peace.
Well, that's a hopeful thought. This deep dive has been quite the journey. We've gone from fighting over scraps of food to building civilizations, from basic instincts to conscious cooperation. It's a lot to think about.
Definitely. And as you keep thinking about all this, I'll leave you with this. If both violence and peace are part of our evolutionary inheritance, which will we choose to nurture? What kind of future will we create, both individually and as a species?